On Point is brought to you by Dargin Global.
A very good evening and welcome to another episode of On Point. I'm Patria K. Charles.
And I'm Dennis Strong.
And we've got a lot to talk about. First being what's happened this week that stands out in your mind, Dennis?
The thing for me is the whole coronavirus thing. I mean, we're talking later about the gas station fire, but the coronavirus and how it has taken over, because it's not just that it's not a pandemic, but it shows for me that global disruption in the economies can be caused by just a little flu, like symptom, and it also shows, as someone said to me today, that we see the real power of China, because a little flu happened in China, the whole place locked down, and there's no manufacturing for the world, no products for the world.
I don't know if I told you about there's a group of women who were talking about, sourcing wedding dresses out of China, and the factory locked down.
Yeah.
So their wedding dresses can't come out of China, and they're in total panic. And I mean, it's everything that we use from a pig
comes out of China,
literally, and it's a real concern. Here in Jamaica, we've had our hands full.
Even in the US,
absolutely.
The stock market tumbled by 1,000 points on Tuesday.
We have had our hands full here in Jamaica. One with the quarantining of folks who would have been in China for a period of time. We're quarantining them for 2 weeks and then releasing them and going through all kinds of testing. We've had to put a lab here in Jamaica to be able to do the kind of testing. Update the lab here to be able to do that kind of testing. The cruise ship that would have come in St. Anne, we would have quarantined the entire ship, allowed them not to board at the port because someone on the ship was feeling ill. It's a lot to wrap your head around. And when you think about the safety of a nation and just how one person can actually affect us.
And the safety of an industry, because tourism will be hugely affected.
I know what we're doing now, but my mind goes to the fact that if someone's on a flight suspected of being infected with the coronavirus and we quarantine that one person for 14 days.
Quarantine the flight.
Wouldn't they have already infected the other 200 people on the plane?
Have to quarantine the flight.
I mean, these are real things to think about. The expense of Corona, the potential expense of Corona, the potential impact of Corona, because what's happening now is we're quarantining that one person who was in China and sending the other 200 people who may have been infected home to infect another 200.
What they have to do, just like the US did with the people who were on that ship, the ship that had the infection, they carried the people home and quarantined them for another 14 days. And that's just the sort of drastic action you have to take. Italy's on shutdown.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah. It's amazing. They say it's a global pandemic now. It's happening that way.
Boy, I'm afraid of a couple of things. I'm afraid of water and what water can do. I'm afraid of fire and what fire can do. And I recognize their powerlessness to some illnesses that are out there. And this is absolutely one of them. But we're not focusing on the corona for the show, folks. We are focusing on two very different things. One being the fire at the Heavens Fresco in Mandeville. And the second thing we're looking at, it is Reggae Month. Why not look at the business of reggae music?
But first, let's take a look back at some of the top business stories of the week.
At number 5, despite the massive blaze at its Mandeville service station last week, future energy source company Fesco says it still plans to go ahead with sales of shares to the public via an initial public offering IPO. However, Fesco says there will have to be a new date for the IPO. The company says NCB Capital Markets Limited remains its advisor. The IPO was initially planned for the fourth quarter of 2020. At number 4, sales of Dettol and Lysol products have surged as the spread of the coronavirus outbreak continues. The disinfectant is seen as providing protection against the spread of the disease, although its effectiveness has not yet been scientifically proven. In China, demand for Dettol branded hand gels is outstripping supply. At number 3, US and European markets slumped into correction territory on Thursday as selling pressure driven by the spread of the coronavirus produced the worst week for American stocks since the depths of the financial crisis in October 2008. The S&P 500 fell 2.4% in early trading in New York, bringing its decline since an intraday peak last week to more than 10%. The Stoxx 600 index of European shares dropped 4% to lodge a similar decline for the week. European markets are set for their worst week since the Eurozone sovereign debt crisis in 2011. Since its January peak, the FTSE Old World Index has shed about $5 trillion in value. At number 2, Jamaican authorities blocked a cruise ship carrying 4,500 passengers and more than 1,600 crew members from calling at Ocheria St. Anne earlier this week. According to the Health Ministry, the ship was denied docking after port health officials discovered that a crew member was in isolation on board. The health authorities said the crew member had a cough, fever, and associated muscle pains with a travel history to a country of interest relating to the coronavirus. At number 1, the Planning Institute of Jamaica, PIOJ, says the Jamaican economy grew by 0.1% for the October to December quarter of 2019. Meanwhile, PIOJ Director General Dr. Wayne Henry says the outbreak of the coronavirus could potentially impact the local economy. This, he said, would largely be due to travel restrictions implemented to stem the spread of the virus, as well as the impact of the slowdown in the Chinese economy on global trade and investment flows.
Up next, occupational safety for gas station workers, right here on Point. Welcome back to On Point. Now, a massive fire broke out at the Fesco gas station, the Heavens Fesco in Mandeville last week Friday, and it's really sparked conversation around regulation and safety at gas stations. Well, here's a look at what we know so far.
A usually busy Friday evening at Heavens Fesco gas station in Mandeville turned deadly on Friday, February 21. Reports are that there was a leak at one of the petrol pumps at the station. As observed in this video, there was fuel gushing as a man tried to stop the leak. But just moments later, a massive explosion causing pandemonium in the town. Passers-by looked on as the fire blazed. In the aftermath, destruction. Some 10 vehicles were destroyed. The Jamaica Constabulary Forces Forensic Unit, along with the Jamaica Fire Brigade and respective insurance teams, continue to do investigations. However, so far, the damage is estimated at about 35 million Jamaican dollars. This fire has raised major concerns about the training of gas station workers and the standard operating procedures during emergencies.
And join us now to talk about safety on the job for gas station workers is safety consultant Keith Davis. Welcome to On Point. Keith.
Thank you for having me.
Before we even get into the interview, I want to know which corporate entities are actually paying for a safety consultant.
There are many corporate entities out there that pays for safety consultants. Safety is very vital for the workforce, the workplace. It's important. It costs corporate entities a lot of money each year for injuries that are occurring on the job, employee injuries, incidents, some not really resulting in injuries, but damage to property. It also results in increasing insurance premiums. So corporate entities are interested in safety.
Got you.
Do we have any numbers you can share? I mean, what is the cost of lack of safety or anything like that, insurance premiums going
Well, in Jamaica, there's not a lot of statistics around this. I mean, I think the ministry, the government could do a little better job in terms of gathering more data on the amount of accidents that are occurring in the workplace and resulting in injuries. You probably could get some amount of figure, but if you look at the international scene in the US, for example, the Bureau of Labor Statistics in the US collects statistics each year, and it costs companies billions of dollars in terms of injury, employment benefits, and also in terms of losses. So it's important to have a good, rigid safety program running in a corporate entity.
Let's start by establishing we don't hear about gas station issues often in Jamaica. It's not the kind of story where we hear on a regular basis that there are fire incidents happening at fuel stations. So something must be going right. True or false?
Not necessarily. The fact that you have not heard about an accident could very well mean that people have been getting away with all these practices over the years. If you look at what happened in Mandeville, you realize that these practices are something that they have been doing over a period of time, and what happened is we're just caught up. It just caught up with us.
What happened, as far as you know?
So what I will tell you is what I have seen on the videos that are circulating on social media. And
you're looking at that with an eye of a trained safety professional.
Exactly. I know that they would have started some investigation, and there are many agencies that would have been involved in that. So what I can tell you is basically from what you would have seen on the videos that are, circulating on social media. And let me just say, we lost a life that day.
Right.
And I really want to take this time to send condolences to Mr. Farquharson and, to his family and friends, and then to wish those that are in, nursing injuries a speedy recovery.
Yeah.
Now, what happened that day was unfortunate and should really not have, it could have been prevented. One of the things I want to talk a little bit about is the dynamics of a fire, right? For a fire to get going, you really need three main components. You need a fuel, you need a heat and ignition or ignition source, and you also need oxygen. All three components in adequate supply, I said adequate supply, can start a fire.
Fuel are plenty at a gas station. So talk about the other two.
Abundance of fuel at gas stations. Oxygen is also in abundance in the atmosphere. 21% of the atmosphere is made up of oxygen. But you also have ignition or heat sources now. Now in a gas station, what are some of the heat sources that we find? Motor vehicles coming in with engines running. The engines are hot.
Yeah.
You have tailpipes or mufflers on these motor vehicles, right? Those are the two main ignition sources, right, that you will find in an environment like that. And when you look at the video, you saw some others. You had people there on cell phones, right, that also a potential ignition source. So that alone, with the vapor from the fuel emanating in the atmosphere, definitely could cause an explosion.
Unruly drivers have been a pain for gas station owners on a regular basis. You pull into the petrol station, you're fueling up, it's the time for you to make the phone call and catch up with all the people that you haven't caught up with for the day. And I think there are gas stations who have gotten to a place where they don't even try to tell you to turn off the cell phone anymore because of the abuse that's been meted out to them by people who are fueling up at the pump. You have taxi drivers who use it as a pickup and loading bay. There are tough people that attendants at gas stations have to contend with every day that make adhering to safety and security difficult.
Well, I have been to places overseas, Patria, Dennis, that I've seen gas station attendants or persons in the station telling people not to get on their phone or get off their phones, right? If we probably look at not serving these unruly motorists, as you call them, if they are either on their phones, or one other thing I need to also explain, even the basic habit of not turning off your engines when you get into a petrol station is also something that we need to consider. In coming to this interview, I stopped at about 6 different gas stations, and there are attendants serving persons while your engines were running. So those are some key things that we need to look at generally as a...
But let me ask you, isn't there a safety code for this particular industry that's issued and monitored by the JGRA, for example? Because I think that something like this that can cause so much damage. I mean, we should have some guidelines around it.
Well, there are regulations out there. There's the Petroleum Quality Control Act, for example. that guides the gas station owners. But if you walk through that act, most of it is centered around the quality control of petrol. So we want to make sure that the petrol is of a good quality for your car engine. It governs that a lot. The
pumps are inspected, the actual physical pumps.
Yes, they are, and that is also governed under that act as well. In terms of they have some amount of safety aspect to it, but the rigid safety program that you're expecting from the gas station owners, I mean, the act that we are expecting to do something like that is the Jamaica Occupational Safety and Health Act, and that is still yet to be passed. That would have had regulations to guide and govern how gas station owners operate, how the staff operate, and so on. One other thing I picked up from the video, for example, was what was happening when the fuel, what the staff were doing when the fuel was flowing out on the ground. And it brings into question the whole issue of training. Now, training, I mean, is a broad issue, because the gas station owners may say, yes, we are administering training, but how often are we doing training? Do we do training to new people when they come on site? I stopped at one. I asked one of the attendants today when I was coming in about whether or not she has been trained, and she said she was there from December working at a service station and has gotten some training around the commercial activities at the pump.
Not safety.
Not so much on the safety aspect.
But the other reality that you must contend with is folks who work at a gas station are not the best paid, and the turnover in a gas station is high. So how do you keep up with the kind of robust, rigorous training that is required that can't happen in a 1 week or a 2 weeks if your turnover is high? How you do it?
But how did you find the time to do the commercial side of the training? Now, you see where the priority lies.
Yes.
The priority is on the commercial side.
The money
I
earning.
need to make sure that when you're dispensing the fuel, you don't over-dispense. That's where the priority lies.
Yes.
But how about the...
But there are controls. I mean, I know pumps should have controls.
Yes.
That when the fuel get up to a certain point, it stop.
Right.
And cut off, which means that it would mean in a situation like that, maybe it wasn't working, eh?
Well, in that instance, you're talking about the nozzle that you place into the tank.
Right.
When it gets to a certain point, it shuts
Yes.
off. But there are also emergency switches that should be in place at the gas stations. The videos that I've seen did not show clearly whether the leak was coming from the nozzle or the pump itself. But one thing for sure, and I have a video that I'd want you to show your viewers on the emergency shut-off switch that should be available at gas stations. And
all gas stations.
All gas stations should have one. I mean, the video clearly shows, and this is not here now. This is a video showing somebody narrating the activities at a pump overseas. But it shows clearly that you should have an emergency shut-off switch labeled, right? And it is placed somewhere nearby, and all the staffs are trained how to operate it. You push it and it should shut off the power on the pump, hence stopping the pump totally.
Immediately, I also think that clearly there must be some kind of evacuation plan for hazardous areas, not just gas stations.
Yes.
But if you've got somewhere that there is the risk of danger, and my father always says, bake him, go and get burned. Something will happen.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
What is the evacuation plan for clearing a gas station in a town center where if there is something wrong, you are talking about hundreds of people at risk?
And that should really come through planning. So we need planning at these different entities. Now, every gas station may have different circumstances because of their location, and how many persons may use that gas station at any point in time. But that comes through emergency planning. And if we're dealing with dangerous goods like hazardous goods like gasoline, I mean, the gas station owners, the JGRA, or all those authorities really need to come together to make sure that these are in place.
But Mr. Davis, I mean, following up on what Patria is asking, because that's a very important question, Patria.
Yes.
Should there be regulations or rules governing this? Because gas stations are in built-up areas,
Yes.
where a lot of people can be at risk.
School next door.
Yeah.
Right.
Houses next door, you know.
I know the NEPA has some guidelines on how gas stations and where they are located. They probably would be better able to explain a little bit more on that, and they would also, look at the environmental aspect as well. But yes, there certainly has a need. There's a need now to look back at the regulation to see where these gaps are, and to see what we need to do to prevent, that tragedy that happened in Mandeville.
Keith Davis, we thank you for your insights inside On Point today. Appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Not a problem. We take a break, folks. When we come back, more On Point. Welcome back to On Point, folks. The Jamaica Music Conference has been on the Reggae Month calendar from about 2013, and it's a space where new professionals in the industry, established professionals in the industry can get together with their compatriots and really think through where the industry is going, and we're talking about it right here on Point.
And joining us now to speak about the conference, which took place from February 13th to 16th, is the conference's director, Joan Webley, and culture expert, Clyde Mackenzie.
Hey,
welcome
folks.
to On Point.
Thank you very much for
That's
having us.
title, Clyde.
You give him about 10.
Oh, geez. Let's talk a little bit about the conference and what the objectives are. Why is this an important part of the February discussion?
Well, first of all, I'm really just one of a team that's been putting this conference together for years. I'm not the only director by any means, and I think that's what's made it so special. The conference is really designed to focus on, as it says, the music business. Those kinds of extra elements needed to make sure that the raw talent that is here can be refined and really be supported to be the bigger international success that's possible. So the Jamaica Music Conference, what we've been able to kind of cultivate over the few years is, as you rightly mentioned, a safe space for information exchange. So you have industry experts as artists as well as the business side coming together and connecting in a really level platform and with a really open, wanting to connect, wanting to share way that persons are saying they haven't experienced quite like that before.
I want to hear a little bit more about that, because in truth, everybody in that room is technically a competitor. Everybody in that room is up for the same gig, is vying for the same entertainment dollar, and traditionally, if we think about hardcore business, competitors keep trade secrets. Why are they open and honest and willing to share at the conference?
Because we all recognize that this industry or this market is big enough for all of us, for what this Jamaican music industry is really bringing to the world. So what you're finding happening at the Jamaica Music Conference is persons moving past themselves and wanting to build the bridges that have prevented us traditionally from moving forward. Because this is not a today problem, the issues that we're facing. And we're recognizing it's been far too long. It's too long that we don't own our publishing properly, or that we don't seem to navigate the business properly, that we don't record on the split sheets like we should. And we want to make sure that we can't have any excuses anymore to say we weren't aware or we were tricked. We need to all do better, and so you're finding persons coming together like never before to share this information.
Right, let me ask you, because there are many conferences every year, right? So since 2013. Have we made any progress since 2013 in terms of how we conduct the music business? Because it seems like I still hear the same cry like I did.
No, I want to address, before I go directly to you, I want to address something that Patria said to Joan, which is cultural goods are different in terms of how they're consumed. It's not
apples for apples, and you can't eat anymore.
It's not. If I produce a cultural product, it can be really appreciated and accepted and consumed, by hundreds, thousands of people, and there's no diminution in its value. So in terms of the competitive nature of the business, I mean, it's not like you're a manufacturer and therefore, you know, you're displacing somebody with your cultural goods or your cultural product. So, I mean,
music
in terms
is different.
of music and the creative goods and cultural goods are different in terms of how they're consumed and how they are produced. So it is not as stark in terms of competition and in terms of displacement as in other fields.
Except a promoter cannot book 50 reggae artists on a show. He's gonna book the top 5.
Well, in some terms, yes and no, because he's also limited by his capacity to attract people.
Yes.
So, I mean, the fact is he might be able to get 50 artists if he's able to do the things that will attract in terms of sponsorship, in terms of all those things, you know. So it is not as competitive as the manufacturing.
And truth be told though, Petria, there is the competition, but the fact is that the industry is realizing it hasn't worked. What we really need to do for Jamaica to take a bigger stake in the international music marketplace, which is where we need to be, is build more bridges between us here and the diaspora, who is doing things all around the world. And so that's what you're seeing happening. It's not because the crab in a barrel mentality that affects other industries isn't in the music industry. That's there. But we're moving past that.
It's a lack
right
of understanding.
Yeah.
You know, when people display that kind of
absolutely
behavior. But going back to the question, have we been making progress? I think you have to view this not in terms of radical shifts, but actually incremental growth. The fact is, I think the powers that be, in terms of traditional sources of capital, in terms of government regulation, they've taken a while to get around to the appreciation of the value of this. People have been preaching for the longest while and saying, look, this is the way to growth and development and so on. And it has been slow. I think people have taken their time to get around. But I think the message is getting through. And I think the more of these kinds of discussions, the GMC and all these other four that we have, is the better it will be for these kinds of thinking to percolate and I mean throughout the rest of the society, and people understand that, look, this is the way you're going to make some serious money as far as this economy is concerned, because this is where we have a real natural advantage.
We want to talk a little bit about the belief of Jamaica in reggae music. It's not lost on me that it took Joe Bogdanovich from foreign to come here, recognize that Jamaican music can sell a 2-night festival exclusively, put his money behind it, and change what Sumfest used to be. It's not headline, or the greatest reggae show on earth, headlined by the greatest foreign acts on earth anymore. And the numbers haven't changed. Why did it take a foreigner to recognize that we can do it?
Sometimes they're better at seeing what we have than we are. And it's not, I wouldn't say it's an indictment. It is the way human beings are. So many times you're so close to the system that you are not really as keen about what is happening around you as somebody who has a little bit of distance from the thing and able to see what's happening. And we have to commend Joe, because he really came in, and I think the people at first didn't understand, because, you know, Sumfest, there was some philosophical confusion as to what it should be. But I think he came in and he crystallized exactly what it should be. It should be a reggae show. It should be a reggae show. And people understand that. So sometimes it's how you market, sometimes it's how you refine your product. And I think in terms of his decision, because there were a number of factors which caused that too. One of it was the uncertainty, the exchange rate, because you can't, I mean, this year an artist will charge you $100,000 and he charges you $100,000 next year. But I mean, in terms of Jamaican dollars, is a vast difference. So, I mean, all of those factors came into play, I think, in making that decision.
John.
Why it was that it was Joe Bogdanovich that had to come here? It's something that I think of all the time. I'm always puzzled as to why it is our business community doesn't take our entertainment value more seriously. There's been a disconnect for years, and I don't know if it's that we're not speaking the same language. But the fact is that as far back as 2008, the research was done by an economist. So it's not just the music industry saying we're important. Vanus James came under a project funded by the World Intellectual Property Organization, and he quantified the impact of the Jamaican music industry and entertainment industry to our GDP. And he showed how the data that was being collected by Statin and other mechanisms could be used to give us that report annually. So we could actually quantify and see where this growth is going. But for some reason, we think it's just a song and dance, wash your foot thing, and we allow the rest of the world to capitalize on this. Whereas our business community here, I would really encourage the business community to do more with what we have at home.
Yeah, picking up on that though, because I mean, I commend, well, I don't know if Clyde don't mind, to be honest, but I commend the whole thing about what Joe has done. He has done very well with the festival, right? But I went to the last one and I was disappointed in one respect. I like the fact that he has got the local artists on, right? But we're still not understanding how to anticipate the show that we need to put on. So it was too crowded.
No, that's part of the success.
No,
I understand.
Going to be empty because nobody not going to see
but what we need to do, if we are going to have something of an international flavor, we have to plan for these things, ensure that, you know,
so it's the biggest acts you talk about, the biggest reggae acts.
And we have to plan for it. We can't have people packed in like sardines and that sort of thing. And I'm not discounting what he has done, you know. But that is one of the things. I come back to the old business again, Clyde, because I don't know that we've capitalized enough based on the fact that I don't think we plan enough and go about it.
We're not being creative enough. We're not being creative enough.
No, because this is a critical point. Because one of the reasons why Joe might be faced with the problem of packing it in or packing people in is the fact that the venues are not available. I mean, you have Plantation Cove is great, beautiful, and fabulous. But you need others, and I know efforts are being made to get Catherine Hall to a state where it's expanded.
But before you talk, but Clyde, my point is this, you know, and it's my same thing with the jazz festival. When it was at Cinnamon Hill, it was great, right? And when you have a demand for a product, you know, it don't mean that you satisfy or increase your profits by everybody coming. You might restrict it because you want to preserve the quality.
You might raise the price.
Exactly, raise the price and restrict who come so that you preserve the quality of the product. And that's what I'm saying. You understand?
Yeah, well, part of that is also...
Don't forget your point, John.
Part of that is going to be due to, you know, the whole question of staging festivals instead of staging shows too.
Right.
Because one of the things is that we have been hooked on putting on concerts rather than making sure that you take as much from the visitors who come here with all the various activities in terms of symposium,
and
all of that.
Festivals.
And festivals.
Right.
Rebel is getting that right.
That's where you need to be going.
He's grown, moved the venue, 2-day concert. It used to be a one event. He's getting that formula right. Joe, I think, is also moving
in that direction.
The mechanics to get that formula right.
He's going in that direction. Definitely.
Joan, you wanted to say?
No, I just wanted, I'm loving the conversation that we're having here. And again, if shameless plug, it is reminiscent of what took place over the last 4 days at the Jamaica Music Conference. You mentioned progress and what is happening. The whole theme was Reggae Mecca Jamaica Vision 2020. And it's a play on the Vision 2030 plan. We recognize we're 10 years out. And so the industry got together. We actually assembled a think tank. Clyde was a part of that. Danny Pepperseed from the UK was a part of that. Cleveland Steely, Abishai Hoylett from Bebel Rock. So quite a diverse representation representation of the industry. And what we've actually come up with are concrete recommendations for what we see as needing to happen over the next 10 years. And that think tank actually have asked not to be disbanded. So we're going to be monitoring what we're recommending over these next 10 years because, as Clyde has rightly said, it's not a magic trick, it's not an abracadabra situation. It's intentional conversation that's going to allow us to implement the great plans that we have.
What needs to change?
You know, as I just said, what actually needs from the recommendations? Well, I'm happy that you asked.
Yes.
One of the main things is to put in place those structures that need to actually make Jamaica become a cultural refinery, not just a place where the raw material is. So publishing warehouse or framework, something that could even be an IPO listing so the nation gets to be involved in helping to cultivate and push the new talent forward.
Yes.
So
enacting the uplift. And then starting at the base.
Yeah, we're always
starting at the
primary
base.
producers.
Speaking of primary schools, starting at the base, we have an educational plan, putting music in schools in a more meaningful way that has actually been developed but not enacted.
Yes.
So the think tank is saying these are the things that if you want to become a cultural superhost, you have to be operating through that lens at all times. You know, really preparing your stakeholders to be an active part in this. And this year at JMC, Wisynco came on board, KFC came on board, Corporate Jamaica came on board like never before. Solid Agency joined with us for the first time. The industry bought into its own conference for the first time in a really solid way. And I feel like it's a critical turning point for us.
Still heartbreaking that we haven't figured out a model to be able to remunerate those who are in the industry in a real and meaningful way.
And it can
when I
happen.
sit down and I hear that our royalties are going primarily outside of Jamaica,
Right.
when you have radio stations in Jamaica that are 100% playing reggae music, not one, not two.
Well, you hear
when you
about
go
the
to the
court
dance,
cases.
it's 100%.
But some
But
of
our
them-
collecting
but some of them-
societies
but some of
are
them-
in court.
Some of them, unfortunately, are not paying over to the,
License fees.
to the collective management organization. And I mean, this is illegal. And I mean, I don't want to say too much about it because it's in court.
It's literally in court.
But the fact is, what Joan is saying about ensuring that we add value at the various stages of the value chain is what's important. So, for example, I always tell people, I say, you have management. If you have good management, he can add or she can add value to you because he can negotiate a better deal. So if we're supposed to get a man offer you 10%, but your management is good to get 15 or 20. You know, so these are things, I mean, it happens every day. And what we have to do, I mean, education, training is a critical part. Preservation, innovation, because a lot of times we don't know the value of preservation. So museums, halls of fame, all of these things are attractions that generate revenue. We need to be looking at award show. We need to be looking at those. How do we make money from those? But preservation in terms of just looking back is critical. And we need that along with the innovation, because I think those are the two pillars. And then, of course, we're going to have to get funding and financing.
Ladies and gentlemen, let the music play. I am all for it. Let us have the necessary conversations and ensure that reggae music lives.
The
and
JMC
lives
effect
well. Absolutely.
continues.
We'll take a quick break and come back with more On Point. Welcome back to On Point. The global cultural and creative industry is worth billions, and it's expected to grow. Just how much? Here are the numbers.
Cumulatively, the global cultural and creative industries raked in $2.25 billion in revenue for 2019. This accounted for 3% of the global domestic product (GDP). Some 29.5 million jobs are created globally through this industry. That's about 1% of the global labor force. The top three employers are visual arts with 6.73 million persons. Almost 3.7 million people are in the book industry and some 4 million in the music industry.
And our On Point team hit the streets and asked, is enough being spent to develop Jamaica's creative industries?
The interest is there for people, but I don't know if the money is being spent. Jamaica has, we've changed a lot where that's concerned, but we have a far, far, far way to go. There's so many artists in Jamaica, musicians, painters, everything, you can think of it. Anything you can think of it in Jamaica. So the government needs to spend more money there to just take us to the world.
I think the Minister of Culture and Mrs. Babsy Grange, I think she's doing a good job in terms of, keeping it alive. But I think they need to do more, especially with dancehall, because it's going. I think our dancehall is dying, especially with the reggaeton and the Afrobeat and all of that. We need to do more.
No, I don't think the government is actually spending enough money on our creative industries, and education is not all for everyone out there, because here what? Not everyone is book smart, and these things are skills that person can go into and use up their craft. And it's also putting us on the international market, so why not put it out there? Why not invest in it? It's our youths we're talking about, and they're our future.
I do personally believe that the government could spend more on the cultural and creative industries. Jamaica has a wealth of talent running through its veins, and the government isn't doing enough to capitalize on the talent that lies within us that could be manifested on the international stage.
Coming already. I think it's just enough. I think it can be a little better, but enough is the right word right now.
No, I think the government really needs to invest more in our cultural aspect. It doesn't matter what aspect of the culture they want to do, whether it's gospel or reggae, they definitely need to put some more into it.
I don't think the government is spending enough to educate our people upon our culture. They are spending more based on importing and taxation and stuff like that. But it would be good if the Ministry of Culture could actually spend more in teaching our culture in our schools and society.
What a discussion.
Yeah, two very good discussions. I mean, the first one on the safety. How long have we been hearing about OSHA now? It is in place?
I actually don't know.
Because it's a while,
Yeah.
It's a while, and it seems like it's critical because based on the discussion we're having with Mr. Davis, it doesn't seem like we have any proper structure in place to deal with these things. And I mean, I think like a gas station, which is in built up communities, and so many people are exposed to it.
And it is a literal lighter.
Yeah.
The whole thing is fuel. I mean, you get scared though if you start to think about all of the dangers and the hazards that are out there and how ill prepared we are as a nation for some of those things. The reality is preparation comes at a cost.
Yeah.
But also so does being ill prepared.
Well,
so you have to work on that trade-off.
The cost of not preparing is significant. So, I think it's something we have to deal with.
I mean,
we definitely have to deal with it. I'd ask the JGRA to take that up, and ensure that they deal with it as an umbrella organization.
I know the owners of the gas station, they're absolutely heartbroken about what happened.
Yes.
And it is one of those institutions that has been a part of Mandeville for a very long time. Mm-hmm. It's not just the gas station. There are other businesses that are associated with it. So you think about life and life lost. But you also think about income and income lost, and you think about what could have been. I mean, the reality of that gas station is the reality of many other gas stations. That's a whole ecosystem unto itself. And the safety of the people not only work there, but the people who visit there on a regular basis to transact business. It's a lot to think about, but it's a lot that must be prepared for as best you can. Yeah. And then there's this other discussion that we had about the creative industries.
Interesting.
Absolutely. I could never understand why the greatest reggae show on earth was headlined by American acts year after year after year after year.
Which is one of the things I didn't like about it. Yeah, I didn't like that about it because it sort of diluted the reggae acts. And I think this is why Rebel Salute came on so strong, because it was the real, people used to say this is an authentic
I remember when Tony's show was just a little thing down in St. Elizabeth. You go, you have a nice time and you come back. And then he totally outgrew that space. It was a one-night festival, and then he had to move it to St. Anna. And I actually have to big up the folks at Plantation Cove because they clearly see a bigger vision, a bigger picture. I can't think of any other space in the country right now that can hold that kind of capacity. And it's a shame because if this is our thing, I go to every Caribbean island and I hear reggae music. And they're owning it and claiming it as if it's their own, including non-English speaking Caribbean countries. If this is the home of reggae, we must put in the infrastructure to be able to own that in a big way and monetize it.
Yeah, and we haven't done that. And I mean, and not only this space, but we start something and we don't build on the quality. So the one that comes to mind, for example, for me is Jazz Festival. When it was at Cinnamon Hill, it was great. It was like a festival. You went there, you relaxed.
And
And then it became too commercialized. So what they were all about after a while is all about packing people into an area. And it's really short-sightedness. That is what I think like Rebel Salute has. You know, Tony, I think, has approached it in a very business-like, sustainable manner. And I want to see the same thing happen with Sumfest. So Sumfest now, the last time as I went, I said it was too packed. You know, that might be an oversight because it wasn't expected, but let's work on that for
I'll put one more thing on the table as we wrap. I think when we think about the success in sport that we have had over the years, particularly track and field, and the work that we're putting from the basic school level, where every sports day you have picnic running against each other in a very competitive manner. There is training, and we approach it like a business. We here in Jamaica now have gotten to a place where we approach sport as a business, and there is a developmental culture of moving you up the ranks. Music is what takes a lot of poor people out of poverty. And if we approach music in the same kind of way, with the same kind of discipline, with the same kind of education around not just the talent, but the business of the music. Treat it as a real
profession.
Watch it bloom. Watch it bloom. That's where we're going to have to wrap it today, folks. I've got to say a big thank you to everybody who made the show possible today and every other day. Thanks also to you, the viewers, who tune in week after week. I'm Patricia K. Charles.
And I'm Dennis Strong. Until next week.
On Point was brought to you by Dargin Global.